guest is Mollie Hemingway of the Federalist and Fox News. Good morning, Mollie. How are you?
Great to be here with you. I'm great.
I was talking with Bethany Mandel just before you came on about the disaster in Turkey, which is actually beyond our ability to process at this point. 6,000 structures destroyed, and that's just in Turkey. We don't know about Syria. And I think back to the Florida condo disaster of last year and how much that transfixes. I really wouldn't know where to begin if I was a newsman in Turkey. But we did come to the original principle, and I want to know if you agree with it. If you have perfect information, you still rescue the children and the women first, right?
I am of that mindset, sure.
And so do you think that everybody recognizes that the actions of the rescuers run completely contrary to modern gender ideology?
Well, you and Bethany and I might think that, but I'm not sure if gender ideology hasn't affected so many people that we might be the outliers here, for all I know.
But it's so instantaneous, the reaction. Of course, you go, because everyone's got cell phones. The most horrific part of this story, I don't know if you've been watching it, are the children with cell phones who are trapped under the rubble with batteries that are expiring, trying to get GPS location on them.
It's just awful. But there are these deeper truths that seem that many people share, that a lot of modern leftists are trying to train people away from, and relationship between the sexes, or treatment of children, or treatment of the elderly, are some of these things. But when things are really horrific and awful, I do think,
natural law returns. And
yeah.
that leads me by diver's path to what I was going to talk with Bethany. I'm going to talk to you. Last night at dinner, Fetching Mrs. Hewitt's best friend is with us for dinner, and talk turned to fashion sense. And of course, on the Drucker-Hewitt spectrum of fashion sense, I am the least fashionable person you've ever met. I have a blue blazer, a blue button-down shirt, and gray pants, and that's the uniform, and I wear it. David Drucker, by contrast, is a clothes horse. Where does Mark Hemingway fall on the Drucker-Hewitt spectrum of fashion sense?
No one has ever accused Mark Hemingway of being particularly fashionable, although I find him very, I find him very handsome.
The Fetching Mrs. Hewitt says the same thing. You just keep wearing your blue blazers and button-down blue shirts, and you'll be fine. But he's not a Drucker fashion horse, right?
No, but
okay.
I do think fashion is important, and I think it should convey beauty, and we seem to have very much rejected that idea.
Well, last night they began to tell me about a runway show that they had just read about, where one of the models was either a very young teen or maybe even prepubescent, who had had the double mastectomy and the transgender fluidity issue. And I said, stop. I don't want to hear about this. I don't cover it on the radio. And by the way, parents, if you've got kids in the back of the car, because it's one of those issues that will get people to turn off the radio. And I'm not here to drive listeners away. So I'm not here to talk about often the issues associated with that. But boy, when the Turkish-Syrian earthquake comes in, all that stuff goes out the window, Mollie. And it suggests to me what Lincoln said: if you drive natural law out the front door, it will come in the back door immediately.
Yes, that's true. I worry that we have done so much damage to so many people that should disaster strike, say, here in the United States, that we would not have, we would have just messed up so many people and so trained people away from where they should be that it would make it much more difficult to survive or thrive.
This is a clarifying moment, though, for the general rule of law, of nature law, as to biological diversity. And I wonder, do you follow the J.K. Rowling stuff?
I do.
Did you see yesterday the gaming company to which she licensed Harry Potter has introduced a transgender figure, and that this has brought about a great deal of controversy at the same time that the former leader of the Scottish Labour Party is denouncing Nicola Sturgeon for her craziness on gender ideology? Do you think, in other words, we've hit the wall and that this is just now being exiled as a subject of ordinary political conversation?
Oh, this is infuriating. I mean, you had the situation with the Scots where they had massive uprising against the placement of a male in a female prison, and the response by the leaders was to just do it again. And you have J.K. Rowling, who is responsible for this entire universe, who is saying very obvious, clear, correct things, about the importance of males and the importance of females and the importance of private space for each and how this is a reality thing. And then the gaming company responds by, overtly going after her with the introduction of something. This is a children's series. And the idea that we would intentionally confuse children, tell them things that aren't true, which is so warping and messed up. It's infuriating. And it doesn't seem like they care that this is rejected by the vast majority of people.
Oh, this is not close.
Harmful.
This is not a close issue, and yet the media is acting as though it is. This is an issue on which 95 to 99% of Americans have great compassion for people who are dealing with actual gender dysphoria, have great suspicion of the manifestation of gender dysphoria among junior high school girls who are particularly prone to social contagion, and generally are against anything permanent being done physiologically to anyone under the age of 18. But we've run into this wall of massive resistance, and then along comes a natural disaster, and biology reasserts itself again, Mollie. Do you think biology inevitably will win this?
Okay, so did you see yesterday that Anthony Blinken tweeted out opposition to female mutilation, which happens in certain cultures across the country, across the world?
Yes.
He tweets out this opposition to it. Meanwhile, his own administration is pushing it on children, permanent sterilization, this horrible mutilation, and they don't even understand how they seem like such evil bad guys to be promoting this. It's always something that I think we should.
Nothing is consistent,
particularly with children.
There is no consistent policy on the left. There is a consistent truce among groups that I self-identify as progressive not to be critical of each other's agenda. That's what, I don't think you're going to find Antifa out there marching for transgendered surgeries at the age of 12, but you're also never going to see Antifa criticizing it. And so it's sort of a truce on the left. But do you agree with me, my general sense, that people who listen to this discussed on the radio don't listen for very long?
Yeah, and I think you should, you always have to be careful how you talk about it too. I'm a mother, so I'm one of the, I'm a radio listener, I'm a mother, and I do, understand that everything that gets mentioned gets discussed. Every kid is listening to everything that's happening.
Well, that's why I always give a pre-warning, and I ramp into it so that people can decide to switch a station for one segment or so. So why do you think? Go ahead.
I think it's important for people to talk with their children about these things because they're getting such a barrage of misinformation from their schools and from the culture. And so if you don't talk about it with your kids, other people will, and you're not going to really like the results. So I think, I just encourage everybody to.
And at what age? I bring this up because the New York Times today discovered a Trip Gabriel story. Education issues vault to the top of the GOP's presidential race. This came out today. Last week, I wrote the same column for the Washington Post after the RNC winter meeting, but it's actually been that way since the Glenn Youngkin gubernatorial campaign. Do you think the New York Times just noticed this, or they want to notice it early in the election cycle rather than late in an election cycle?
I view it as them warning their political allies to be careful because it is a very important issue for people. It is affecting elections. So they're asking them to just be a little bit more careful about how they push their social agenda.
Amen. That's exactly. It's a warning signal. Now, Mollie, you are a star of stage and screen. I run into you at green rooms all over the place. Have you ever seen Corey DeAngelis on a Sunday show or any similarly situated high-profile legacy news media channel?
No.
And what does that tell you?
I don't know.
It tells me that they do not know who is the voice of the movement. It's like Chris Rufo and Corey DeAngelis have become the most effective public intellectuals in their spaces in the last 3 years, and mainstream media doesn't know they exist.
Well, that happens, I feel like, with so many people who, there is this over-representation of fringe viewpoints that are held by elites, and then there's this massive underrepresentation of normal viewpoints. It's actually why I like to be in the media, even though I don't, I wouldn't otherwise love living in D.C. or anything like that, but I think about how many people are not well represented by the pundits, by the people on TV, and it's important to have that representation.
I 100% agree. This is the greatest source of the need for ideological diversity. And normal is a word that triggers people, but I say people in the median position on any issue in the country don't often show up on television unless it's Mollie Hemingway. Thank you, Mollie. I'll be right back, America.